As humans, we all share some common experiences, no matter what part of the world we live in, and no matter what our culture may be. We share them because we are human. Some are obvious. We are all born. We all gather sustenance in some way. We all sleep. We all dream. We all love and hate, and we all die. These are things we understand. However, there are other experiences we share that are not so easily understood, such as dreams, sleep paralysis, and the Old Hag. The Old Hag occurs everywhere in every human culture. It is sometimes called an experience, sometimes a phenomenon, but it is sometimes, in fact, often called an attack, and for good reason, because it is often utterly terrifying. So what is it? Well, let's take a look, but please don't doze off, because something might be waiting for you. What is the Old Hag? The Old Hag phenomenon, experience, or attack is a constellation of separate elements. Central to this suite of elements is sleep paralysis, also known as nocturnal paralysis, sleep numbness, and post-dormital cholastic fits. They all mean the same thing: sleep-associated paralysis. A key element to the experience of sleep paralysis is the feeling of being completely awake, but unable to move any part of the body, with the exception of the eyelids and eyes. No other part of the body responds to the attempt at voluntary movement. It typically lasts only a few seconds, but can last up to several minutes. Sleep paralysis was once thought to be extremely rare and associated with narcolepsy, but is now known to be quite common, with estimates of its occurrence ranging from 20% to 60% of the world's population. Typically, a person may experience 1 or 2 episodes in a lifetime, but some people can experience regular episodes at intervals of days, weeks, or months, and very few can experience them almost every night for varying periods of time. The crucial element to the Old Hag experience which sets it apart from simple sleep paralysis is the acute awareness, sometimes accompanied by a visual experience, of some sort of presence in the room with the sleeper. This may include the sensation of an entity standing over the experiencer, or the sensation of the bed being depressed by the weight of something sitting or lying on it. This presence may be strongly sensed and felt, but not seen, or may typically manifest as a dark shadow, a dark mist, or a human shape with no defining features, except occasionally for intensely dark eyes, darker than the entity itself. There may also be the tactile sensation of being touched, prodded, or even pinched. Most importantly, and central to the experience, the sleeper may feel a heavy weight on their body, typically on the chest, but sometimes on the legs, and sometimes the sensation of being strangled. The sense of wakeful paralysis coupled with the weight pressing on the body is a classic Old Hag attack. The experience is almost invariably terrifying, and in fact, is the source of the concept of the nightmare, a word derived from the Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon mara, which may have originally meant night death or something similar. Nightmares were not just bad dreams, as the term is used today, nor were they night terrors. These are different phenomena. Instead, they were regarded as some sort of supernatural assault, sometimes as a result of being cursed or bewitched. How widespread is the experience? The Old Hag has equivalents in virtually every culture in which the phenomenon has been studied. It is well known, for instance, in Canada's Newfoundland, where it is a part of the cultural tradition, and has been studied extensively in Japan, where it is called kanashibari, or bound up with metal. It has also been documented across the United States, Europe, throughout Asia, and among the various indigenous groups of the far north, the Inuit, Yupik, and Aleut. In the United States, which contains a number of subcultures, the pattern is the same. Sleep paralysis is usually but not always hypnopompic, the presence of an unknown and unwelcome entity, and the feeling of physical oppression. It is a universal human experience, which I think you'll agree is terrifying. But what causes it? There are a couple of perhaps incidental things to mention here at the outset. These are things that concern the immediate causal factors that may be involved. First, for some unknown reason, it tends to be more common among people who sleep on their backs. Sleeping on one side would presumably make it more difficult to experience the sensation of crushing weight on the chest, yet the experience is not, as a rule, associated with sleeping on one's stomach, which presumably would allow such a sensation. But this does not appear to be the case. Second, although it can happen at any time, and is most associated with nighttime sleep, there are quite a few accounts of the experience occurring to people who nap during the day, especially in the late morning. Why this is unknown, but it may be associated with the next point. Third, people who are chronically fatigued, sleep deprived and stressed seem particularly prone to such experiences. They may be late-night workers, chronically fatigued and stressed students, and others in similar condition. All of this suggests a physiological component to the experience, which is not unexpected since we experience everything, regardless of their natures and origins, through physiological processes. The fact that the phenomenon is particularly associated with some degree of sleep deprivation would suggest that there is a component of disruption of normal sleep cycle involved. This is an important point because the experience is strongly associated with certain stages of the sleep cycle. The subjective experience. The subjective experience is generally a profound terror, although on very rare occasions, when the experience is frequent, the subject may actually relax and even welcome it, although this is very rare. The initial paralysis is generally at first confusing and frightening. The fear is exacerbated by the sense of an additional, unknown and foreign and intrusive presence. Figures may be perceived, usually dark, but on rare occasions luminous. The paralysis itself may dissipate spontaneously, but as modern research into sleep paralysis has shown, moving even just a finger or toe is typically enough to end the paralysis, and coincidentally also the visitation of these presences. The most frightening are the visions of dark entities hovering over the bed of the subject, standing around the bed, or sitting or lying on the bed with the subject, and this is always accompanied by a feeling of helplessness. In these cases, the main source of fear is proximity and paralytic helplessness, since the nature of this entity is unknown. Not everyone finds this experience threatening, and some people may even strike out, but most do not, sometimes out of fear, and sometimes as a result of sleep paralysis. Those who strike at the entity, or even manage to turn on a light, find that it dissipates, and this suggests that it is a sleep-related hallucination or dreamlike phenomenon. Again, numerous accounts indicate that regaining the ability to move, even one digit suffices to break the paralysis, and the general experience of an intruding entity. So, is the experience real? The question is, are people who are subject to an Old Hag attack in fact being attacked by an actual, objectively existing entity? The study of the Old Hag phenomenon was given its first rigorous systematic treatment by Dr. David J. Hufford, originally a folklorist and now retired from the University of Pennsylvania, where he held positions as a university professor and chair of medical humanities and professor of neural and behavioral science. Hufford became interested in the Old Hag phenomenon after his own encounter with it in the 1970s. In 1982, after some years of field research, he published what has become a classic in the field, The Terror That Comes in the Night, in which he distinguished between what he called the cultural source hypothesis and the experiential source hypothesis. This was the culmination of his investigation into numerous Hag attacks, ranging from archived historical records to extensive interviews with people who had experienced them. It was a way to disentangle Old Hag experiences that were preconditioned by cultural elements and expectations, from experiences that occurred to people without any prior knowledge or predisposition to them. This was considerably easier in the 1970s, before the advent of the internet, than it would be now. What he found was that culture did not determine who experienced an Old Hag attack. In all the cases he studied, the event followed the same basic outline, of course with minor variations, whether or not the subject had any familiarity with the experience. This in turn indicated that cultural expectations do not influence this experience, and so believing in the reality of certain paranormal beliefs, such as an entity like the Old Hag, is, as Hufford puts it, reasonable, because such encounters aren't the result of any obvious cultural or attitudinal leanings, but nonetheless have experiential elements. This doesn't mean that they are true, but merely that it is reasonable and sensible to believe them, based on the available evidence. Given this, what the hell is happening? What is certainly happening is hypnopompic, and less often, hypnagogic sleep paralysis, accompanied by a clear sense of being fully awake, which is to be expected. What is also certainly happening is the strong sense, whether seen or only felt, of a strange, anomalous, often threatening, unexplainable presence. This is not culturally determined because it happens to people across many cultures, both within one country and also worldwide, and all cultures have words or phrases for the experience. Hypnopompic sleep paralysis typically occurs during the REM, or rapid eye movement portion of the sleep cycle. The REM cycle is essentially the dream portion of our sleep. And so what appears to be happening is that sleepers awaken while in a dream state, but may still incorporate dream elements into this waking state. And as noted, they will experience sleep paralysis for periods ranging from seconds to several minutes. What is odd, however, and cannot be explained by science, is why people from all over the world experience the exact same thing. One might expect that experiencing a waking dream could take an endless variety of forms, yet the Mara or Old Hag recurs again and again in all cultures. Why is that? Perhaps we have those same experiences because we live in the same world, a world we do not fully understand, and there are things out there that we have still not been able to get to grips with. Dreams may be a vehicle to another world. This seems, on the face of it, to be highly unlikely, although following Hufford, not unreasonable. It's just implausible because evidence is lacking. But we have evidence for what's happening in the brain during these episodes. The most reasonable, and probably at present correct position to take, is that we still have barely begun to understand the human brain and mind. The mind is an amazing machine. There is recent evidence that certain neurons, called LP5 neurons, act as mediators between other types of neurons to create consciousness. This is significant because we still don't understand consciousness or self. We do know that the brain is capable of astonishing things, although oftentimes we don't know how. So is sleep paralysis and a visitation by the hag a universal trait that all of us hold within our brain? One thing that could tip this uncertainty one way or the other would be evidence of physical harm, perhaps in the form of bruises that could not be self-inflicted, since this would constitute evidence of an external agent. And this is where we call upon all of our viewers. If any of you have ever had a visitation by the hag and feel comfortable sharing your story with us, please send us a story to mystory@top5s.co.uk. If you have any physical evidence of attacks and feel comfortable sharing this, we'd also love to hear from you. We still don't know what the Old Hag is. Does she break through the barrier during sleep, or is there a more scientific and plausible explanation? As of yet, we simply do not know. Regardless, thanks for watching, and sweet dreams.